Kurtop here, and this is 100 scary stories from travelers that will make you think. Silicon creatures. We are all used to thinking that life is built on carbon. Carbon is the foundation for DNA molecules, proteins, and all living things on Earth. But what if this is just one of the possibilities? Scientists have long been discussing the idea of silicon life. Silicon is also an element capable of forming strong chains and complex structures. Only these structures will be different, more rigid, crystalline, perhaps even not like organic matter. There is a hypothesis that in conditions of high temperatures and pressure where carbon life is destroyed, silicon life, on the contrary, can flourish. Imagine a world where living creatures are translucent formations similar to stones that grow, feed on minerals, and transmit information through vibrations. We would take such an organism for an ordinary stone and would not even guess that it is alive. What is especially alarming is that probe data sometimes shows anomalies that are difficult to fit into carbon models. Scientists do not speak seriously about living crystals, but such versions slip through in closed reports. And if silicon life exists, then this means one thing: we can walk among it for millions of years without noticing that these stones are not stones at all. Ancient ziggurat, 5,000 years old. Sialk is an archaeological site located on the territory of the city of Kashan in Iran. Previously, locals considered it a cursed city and tried to avoid it. However, a severe flood that occurred in 1930 helped reveal the history of the hills beginning around the 3rd millennium BC. The building itself is a ziggurat, a stepped religious building in the ancient Mesopotamia made mainly of clay. Ziggurats were the first centers of science in the history of mankind, where the priests observed the heavenly bodies and the life of the universe. It is believed that the oldest ziggurat is located in the suburbs of the city of Kashan in central Iran and was built around the 3rd millennium BC. After the flood in 1930, a group of researchers led by French archaeologist of Ukrainian origin Roman Gershman went to excavate in Iran. However, the results of their labors did not attract the attention of the then authorities until 2001. Researcher Grishman estimates that this ancient civilization is over 10,000 years old. The structure is in poor condition, like many other ancient ruins in Iran. Sialk was built by Elam, one of the most ancient civilizations in history, located in the southwest of Iran. Elam built 4 ziggurats, including Sialk. During the excavations, various artifacts were found, including ceramics, glass, metal objects, jewelry, and coins, which testify to the richness and diversity of the ancient culture of Sialk. Ancient texts were also found in the Elamite language, which was common in the region for several millennia BC. One of the most interesting artifacts found at Sialk is a cast image of the goddess Nana, which is thought to date from the 3rd to 2nd millennium BC. Nana was the goddess of fertility and motherhood, and her cult was widespread in ancient Mesopotamia and Iran. In addition, a large collection of stone sculptures was found in Sialk, which represent images of animals, people, and gods. They were made in various styles and techniques, which testifies to the richness and diversity of the artistic culture of ancient Iran. The mystery of the Basil mummy. I already talked about this find in one of my videos, but the story has changed. In 1975, in the Swiss city of Basil, in the Barfusser Church, the mummified remains of a woman were found, and to this day it was believed that she died of syphilis. Such conclusions were made by researchers due to the fact that a lot of mercury was found in her body. In the 18th century, syphilis was treated with mercury, hence such conclusions were made. But now it was possible to establish that the woman died from a bacterium unknown to science. The woman's name was Anna Katharina Bischoff. She was the wife of a pastor and died in 1787. Using DNA analysis, researchers even identified her descendants. One of them, with a 99% probability, is British politician Boris Johnson. The scientists found a new bacterium that was most abundant in brain tissue, and this correlated with the highest concentration of mercury in the brain. Most likely, the doctor in those years made a wrong diagnosis and treated her for syphilis with mercury, which greatly weakened the woman's body. In addition, she was overweight, had gallstones, and other diseases. In the 18th century, it was too humiliating to claim that a wealthy priest's widow had sexually transmitted syphilis. When people of this status died, an obituary was written about them, who the person was during his lifetime, what he did, and what he died from. There is no mention of this woman. Bischoff's diagnosis would have prevented her from using public baths or being treated in a regular hospital. As a result, the mercury with which she was treated slowed down the decomposition and turned her into a mummy. Ancient cemetery in Peru. Archaeologists have discovered the remains of 42 people in a cemetery next to a Peruvian hospital dating back to the 16th century, when the country first became part of the Spanish Empire. Most of the remains once belonged to men, some of whom suffered from syphilis before they died. Built in 1552 specifically for Spanish patients, this historic building is considered the oldest hospital in both Peru and South America. This site, where the first doctors of the 16th century are believed to have been trained, also had a church where the dying could be closer to God, and even a separate ward for the mentally ill. The bodies remained undiscovered for centuries, despite being buried only 30 centimeters underground. According to experts, the remains of the mummies of the last Incas, a tribe that once ruled the Andean region of South America before the Spanish conquest, may also be buried here. In addition, archaeologists have discovered an underground crypt and fragments of pre-Hispanic pottery, possibly from the time of the Incas. Most of the newly found bones belong to men, some of whom experts say died of syphilis and skull deformities. Archaeologists have found a cross, possibly made of copper, that was around the neck of one of the deceased. Excavations at the site began 20 years ago and have unearthed traces of a cemetery, as well as the remains of a 19th century fountain, an early colonial-era garbage pit, and a vaulted structure. But 42 bodies were unearthed just after months of recent excavations in downtown Lima. Experts discovered an underground crypt and fragments of pre-Hispanic ceramics, probably created even before the construction of the hospital. Experts believe that the remains of at least 3 rulers of the Inca Empire, Pachacutec, Huayna Capac, and Tupac Yupanqui, may be buried under the complex. Over the past 200 years, there have been several unsuccessful attempts to find these remains. Student discovers entire city. Mexican archaeologists have accidentally discovered an ancient Mayan city hidden in the jungles of Campeche. Tulane University research student Luke Old Thomas discovered the city called Valeriana while looking through LiDAR data. This method maps objects beneath vegetation, and Old Thomas was able to see what had previously eluded other experts. The city of Valeriana, with an area of about 16.6 square kilometers, is impressive in its structure. Pyramids, sports fields, amphitheaters, and roads connecting neighborhoods have been found here. Archaeologists believe that Valeriana was likely home to 30,000 to 50,000 people at its peak from 750 to 850 AD. The city is second in density only to the famous Calak Mul. The urban layout reveals a complex structure, 2 large centers with temple pyramids connected by a network of roads and residential areas, as well as residences and ceremonial sites. Even traces of water tanks have been found, indicating a thoughtful use of natural resources. This discovery confirms that tropical forests were not places where civilizations go to die, but could support rich and complex cultures. Professor Marcello Canuto notes that the use of LiDAR technology in the last 10 years has accelerated the discovery of new Mayan cities that were previously unknown. Board games. The love of board games in mankind arose thousands of years ago. These games appeared before many civilizations and accompanied people for thousands of years. The most ancient game, according to archaeologists, was dice games. Cubes found during excavations and dating back more than 5,000 years are almost indistinguishable from modern ones. This confirms that the passion for the game existed in prehistoric times. One of the most ancient games with a board and chips is the Egyptian game of Senet, which arose around 3,500 BC. According to legend, it was invented by the god of wisdom Thoth to lift the curse of the goddess of the sky nut imposed by the god of the moon Khonsu. Senet was not just entertainment, but also a game with a sacred meaning, symbolizing the struggle between good and evil, as well as the path of the soul to the afterlife. In the East, one of the most ancient games is considered to be Go, the history of which begins around 2000 BC. This strategy game, still popular today, symbolized wisdom and concentration. Backgammon, on the other hand, probably originated in ancient Iran and appeared about 5,000 years ago, although the rules were not documented until Byzantium in the 5th century AD. The Romans also loved board games and played them in taverns where they ate and had fun. Often game boards were carved directly into the tables. Although gambling was prohibited on the streets, it was freely played indoors. Archaeologists have also found cheating dice with a weight inside, which indicates attempts at cheating even in ancient times. The second sun. There is a theory that our sun has a dark twin. Scientists have named it Nemesis after the goddess of retribution. This hypothetical star has never shown itself to us directly, but astronomers have noticed an alarming pattern. Mass extinctions on Earth occur with alarming regularity, approximately every 26 million years. And if you trace the dates, it turns out that an invisible force once in a certain cycle launches a deadly rain of comets and asteroids towards Earth. According to one version, Nemesis is responsible for the death of the dinosaurs. Its orbit takes it far beyond the solar system and then returns, destabilizing billions of icy bodies in the Oort cloud. Most fly off into the void, but some rush towards us. And each time this cycle repeats, Earth experiences a catastrophe of planetary proportions. Officially, this is just a hypothesis. But if Nemesis exists, then we never had one sun. All of humanity lived in a binary star system without even knowing it. And then the question becomes even more stark. If we have a second sun, is it really the true master of our destiny? The largest treasure was taken to a dump. You can find anything in a garbage dump, from rare furniture and collectible prints to weapons and even money. But what exactly no one expected to see in a landfill is one of the largest treasure troves in Europe. In Poland, not far from Wrocław in the city of Środa, a precious treasure was discovered at a construction waste dump, which was nicknamed the Środzki treasure. It consisted of medieval coins and jewels of Czech monarchs from the 14th century. The treasure was discovered by workers in 1985 who were raking a pile of construction debris from destroyed houses. One of the workers saw gold coins spilling out of an earthenware vessel. He stopped the machinery and took the coins for himself. I note that earlier coins have already been found here, but these were isolated cases. While the local authorities found out about this treasure, some of the coins and precious jewelry were stolen by the locals. When archaeologists arrived at this place and took out everything that was left there, they estimated it at $100 to $120 million. Of the most valuable that was unearthed was the royal crown, which belonged to Blanca de Valois, the wife of King Charles IV of Bohemia. So by chance, ordinary workers were able to find one of the most expensive treasures in Europe. From gold coins, we will abruptly move on to drawings of ancient people with giant heads. Atlantean metal books. The ethnologist, entrepreneur, and collector was born in Hungary, but he spent most of his life in South America, where he made a sensational discovery. In 1955, Janusz Juan Moritz discovered an amazing ancient underground utility system. The public learned about it only after a few years, since the researcher was bound by the requirement of non-disclosure. The self-taught scientist found underground roads and tunnels that stretched under Ecuador, Argentina, and Peru. Their walls and ceilings were not just processed, but carefully polished. The paths ended in huge underground halls. In one of these, Moritz allegedly found ancient books made of metal with sheets of 96 by 48 centimeters. In the scientific community, they are called plaquettes. Each was covered with unknown signs and symbols. Moritz himself and his followers believed that this was how the library of an ancient civilization, possibly the Atlanteans, was discovered. In accordance with an alternative version, the prophecies of the Incas, or the knowledge of representatives of other planets who arrived on Earth, were recorded in the books. In the center of the hall was furniture made of an unknown material. The original enthusiast also came across a golden figurine of an aircraft, which was sent to the Bogota Museum. After studying by experts, it became clear that the material of the figurine, which resembles an airplane in appearance, is pure gold, which in this form does not occur in nature, but contains impurities in the form of silver, copper, iron, and other metals. In 1976, the story received a new round. The Americans, supporters of Moritz, organized a new expedition, choosing astronaut Neil Armstrong, a media person, as the official leader. The expedition successfully reached there, but did not find any library with huge metal books. But in the tunnels, they found a burial room of 1500 BCE with burials, and in parallel, scientists cataloged about 400 plant species. Moritz died in 1991 and never told anyone the exact coordinates of the underground library, which supposedly belonged to the Atlanteans. Signals from the deep galaxy. In 1977, a radio telescope in Ohio picked up a signal that was only 72 seconds long. The scientist who noticed it wrote one word on the printout: "Wow!" And to this day, no one has explained where it came from. Today, we detect hundreds of mysterious bursts, fast radio bursts, or FRBS. They last a fraction of a second, but their power exceeds the energy of an entire galaxy. Sometimes they repeat, as if someone on the other end of the line is trying to get through. Scientists call them anomalous natural phenomena. But the truth is, we don't know their source. And if it's not nature, then who exactly is knocking on our door from billions of light years away? Figure from a museum in Peru. If most of the figurines can be explained by the abstract image of animals, then in this particular case, everything is much more complicated. Here we clearly see a person who holds in front of him nothing more than a steering wheel, and in front of him there is an incomprehensible thing. Surprisingly, scientists do not try to explain this artifact in any way, and for the most part simply ignore it. Of course, this is just a small part of the artifacts that are either not explained at all, or attributed to religious accessories, or even disappear altogether. Our history is full of mysteries. Unfortunately, a huge part of them will remain unraveled. Samurai jug with coins. In Japan, they discovered a huge ceramic vessel, more than a meter in diameter, filled to the brim with medieval coins. Archaeologists have found this state of a certain Japanese samurai in Saitama Prefecture near Tokyo. Experts called this treasure the largest catch of medieval coins ever discovered in the land of the rising sun. The vessel and coins are, according to experts, as many as 6 centuries. Whose jar of treasure is this? Why was it hidden there, and why did no one come back for it? The jug was buried at a depth of 3 meters. It's not damaged. However, the copper and the bronze coins found inside oxidized and turned bright green. Archaeologists believe that there are more than 100,000 of them. They were strung on a rope. Along with the money was a wooden tablet. The sign says Nihyaku Rokuju in Japanese, which means 260. This may refer to the measurements of 260 kan, which are units of 1,000, and means that there are 260,000 coins in the jar. Historians say that a chain of 1,000 coins was worth 1 ounce of silver and was the usual amount to keep with you. At the time when this treasure was hidden, the country was divided and ruled by the emperor, who gave the conquered lands to the shoguns, the military leaders. Perhaps the rich warrior hid his treasures because he was in danger of being robbed due to civil unrest in Japan at the time. Engineer from the future. In 1961, in the archives of the Romanian city of Sibiu, a professor was looking through old military records and accidentally came across a manuscript. Between the tables and calculations were strange diagrams. Not crossbows, not guns, but multi-stage rockets, stabilizers, nozzles, references to fuel. Everything looked like technical documentation from the 20th century, but the document was created in the 16th century. The author was Conrad Haas, an artillery master who served at the court in Transylvania. He ran the barracks, drew diagrams, wrote without embellishment and unnecessary words. His treatise was simply called How to Make a Good Rocket That Can Rise into the Sky on Its Own. Drawings, calculations, rare explanations, everything, as if he really tried to build something that did not exist at that time. Little is known about his life. He was born in 1509, was an engineer, did not participate in battles but created weapons. At the very end of the manuscript, he left a phrase unlike anything else: more peace and less war. Let the guns remain under the roof. Let there be no shot. Then the prince will save his money and the gunsmith his life. It's not a statement, just a quiet line at the bottom of the page. The moon and its mysteries. We are used to thinking of the moon as something simple, a night satellite, a beautiful disk in the sky. But the more we study it, the stronger the feeling. Something is wrong here. For starters, its size. The moon is too big for a satellite. Its diameter is almost a quarter of the Earth. Neither Jupiter nor Saturn nor Neptune have anything like this. This is an anomaly. Moreover, the moon's orbit is almost perfectly round. Natural bodies do not behave like this. They move in an ellipse. And here it is as if someone corrected the trajectory. Further on, there are craters. The impact craters on the moon are huge, but none are deeper than 4 kilometers. Even the most colossal collisions did not pierce the crust. Why? As if there is invisible armor under the surface. In the 70s, Soviet engineers said outright, "The moon behaves as if it were hollow," and confirmation came in a NASA experiment. When a module was deliberately dropped on the moon, the satellite began to vibrate. Not for a minute, not for for 2 hours. The moon hummed like a bell. That's what they wrote in the reports. But a rock doesn't behave like that. That's how a hollow structure behaves. The oddities don't end there. We only see one side of the moon. Scientists call it tidal locking. But why did this happen only here? Why is our satellite forever facing us with one side? And why is the dark side so different? Jagged, destroyed, as if it had been through an ancient catastrophe. And then there are the flares. They've been observed for decades. Bright lights that light up on the surface. Sometimes they last a second, sometimes a whole minute. NASA keeps a catalog, but there's no answer. Gas, volcanism, or working equipment? In 2019, a new discovery was made. Something massive was found under the moon's southern crater, an object that causes gravitational distortions. Scientists have cautiously suggested that it might be an asteroid stuck in the crust. But it is strange that the moon survived it without being destroyed. And all this makes us recall the hypothesis of Vassin and Shcherbakov. What if the moon is artificial? According to their version, it is not a satellite, but an ancient mechanism, with a metal shell, cavities inside, and possibly equipment. Science fiction? Yes, but the facts stubbornly do not fit into a natural picture. Ancient city in an oasis. Archaeologists have discovered the ruins of an ancient city over 4,000 years old in the Khaybar Oasis in northwestern Saudi Arabia. The city, called Al-Nata, was founded around 2400 BC and consisted of about 50 houses, designed to accommodate about 500 people. The city was surrounded by a powerful wall 14.5 kilometers long, which probably protected its inhabitants from raids and harsh climate. Interestingly, Al-Nata was preserved thanks to a basalt layer that protected the ruins from destruction. The discovery was made possible by observations from above. The structure of the city walls and buildings hidden underground was visible from the air. Al-Nata became an important evidence of the transition of the region's inhabitants from a nomadic lifestyle to a settled one. Previously, scientists believed that at that time this territory was only a desert, unsuitable for life. However, finds in the necropolis, including metal axes, daggers, and agate items, indicate a high level of development of crafts and technologies. Brewing. The history of beer begins in the Neolithic period more than 11,000 years ago. It is one of the oldest drinks that accompanied humanity in the early stages of its development. Some scientists even hypothesize that people began to grow grain not for food, but to brew beer. This drink could be not just a way to quench thirst, but also played an important role in rituals and communication. Brewing is mentioned in one of the oldest literary works, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is about 3.8 thousand years old. This text, created in Mesopotamia, shows that beer was already known and valued in society. Beer also played an important role in the legislation of that time. In the Code of Hammurabi, a collection of Babylonian laws, beer establishments are mentioned as places that were especially strictly monitored. The owner of a pub had to maintain order, and if criminals gathered in his establishment, he could be sentenced to death. The ancient Egyptians were also big beer lovers. Pyramid builders received a liter of beer every day for their work. Interestingly, high-ranking officials received as much as 5 liters per day, which emphasizes how important beer was in ancient society. A book with human hair. When you hear the phrase, "a book made of human hair," the first thing that comes to mind is fiction, something from a cheap horror movie. But then you see a photo, and you stop smiling. These books really exist. France, 14th to 15th century. Medieval monasteries where manuscripts were bound into booklets, sewn from something that at first looked like skin. And then you realize it's hair. Real. Long, light, human. For a long time, scientists could not explain why this was necessary. Only recently have more or less clear hypotheses appeared. It turned out that the hair did not just end up there by accident. It was sewn in deliberately, as a material and as a symbol. Perhaps these were reliquaries, personal items. Someone left a strand of hair in the book in memory of the dead, or on the contrary, as a vow, as part of repentance, or perhaps as an element of protection. Hair was considered to be the carriers of the soul. In one case, it was about a book of prayers, where between the pages there was not one strand, but a whole layer of hair, dense, sewn with the text. And for someone, this book could be the only connection with a dead person, or with themselves. Now imagine, you are in a library pulling out an old volume, and it is alive. Not in a figurative sense, for real, when knowledge and memory are fastened not with ink, but with a person. Temple complex in France. Archaeologists have found a large temple complex from the time of Roman Gaul in northwestern France. Previously, in the territories that were once called Gaul, archaeologists have discovered many ancient sacred sites. But the new find seems very important even against this background. Not only is the sanctuary itself quite well preserved, but the surrounding buildings can still be seen. All this together gives an idea of the daily life of both the servants of the temple complex and visitors. The name comes from the Roman name of the Celtic tribes, the Gauls, Later Galli, who fought for their freedom with Rome for a long time. Gaul was called the lands that are part of such modern countries as France, Luxembourg, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Switzerland. Excavations were carried out on an area of more than 7 hectares. The cult complex consists of a large sanctuary bounded on both sides by a 60-meter gallery with columns. 2 temples, a larger one and a smaller one, are typical Romano-Celtic phantoms. This is the name of the temple of square masonry, in the center of which a whole sanctuary was built, enclosed by an internal square gallery. The figure of the deity to whom the temple is dedicated was placed in the whole. The faithful read their prayers and made offerings in the gallery. A complex of 2 phantoms at once is a rare find. Archaeologists suggest that the large temple was dedicated to the main deity or deities of the sanctuary, the small one to deities of secondary importance. The temples were built in the 1st century BC, immediately after the Roman conquest of Gaul, and they functioned, according to experts, for at least 5 centuries until the 4th century AD. On the territory of the complex, archaeologists discovered a small bronze figurine of the god Mars. It can be assumed that at least one of the temples was dedicated to him. Interestingly, in Roman Gaul, Mars was not so much a bloodthirsty god of war as a benevolent figure, a protector, a healing deity. In addition to the 2 temples, experts unearthed residential buildings and baths with an area of 120 square meters. Baths are an indispensable element of the Roman lifestyle. Judging by their size, they were intended for public use, including visitors to the sanctuary. Venus, the planet that breathes. If Mars is called our potential second home, then Venus is hell. Everything there is against life. Heat of 500 degrees, pressure like at a depth of a kilometer in the ocean, and clouds of sulfuric acid. But in 2020, the world was shocked by the news. Phosphine was discovered in the atmosphere of Venus. On Earth, it occurs in 2 cases, in the laboratory and as a byproduct of living organisms. Back in the 70s, Soviet probes transmitted mysterious pictures. They showed objects similar to stones that changed position. Scientists rushed to attribute everything to technical defects. But after the discovery of phosphine, many remembered these photos. And now the question sounds different. What if there is life on Venus? Not the one we are used to, but different. The one that has learned to survive in acid clouds and use poison like air. If life exists where it should not be, then our Earth is not a unique miracle at all. We are no exception. We are just one of the forms that accidentally survived on our planet. Altai mummy. Altai, Pazyryk burial mounds. Thanks to ice, the skin of a person about 2,500 years old has been preserved, and on it, almost disappeared tattoos. They were studied anew. Scientists examined the images in different lighting, studied the pigment, and reproduced the techniques on models. An unexpected discovery was made. The tattoos were not made by one hand. On the right hand, there are deer and big cats, drawn with the finest line with the correct anatomy. This is the level of an experienced master. On the left, the geometry is simpler and more uneven, probably the work of an apprentice. This is the first convincing case when several artists can be seen on one body. Pigment, ordinary soot, tools, a single needle for the outline, and a comb, several needles on a bar, for quickly typing dots and shadows. This combination explains the depth and texture of the lines under a microscope. Incisions made during mummification sometimes cut through the drawings. This means that they were not kept for the sake of ritual. Tattoos were part of everyday life, a sign of status, belonging to a group, personal symbols. The lines on the skin reveal the structure of the Iron Age community. There are masters, there are students, and there is a demand for complex body ornamentation, which was important during life and not after death. Fiery teachers. There is a strange coincidence in the iconography of different eras and peoples. The figures of gods, prophets, and teachers of humanity are almost always surrounded by radiance. The Egyptians have solar discs above their heads. The Mayans have halos in the form of flames. In Byzantine iconographic canons, there are golden circles around the face. In India, there are entire auras of fire. The official version sounds simple. It is a symbol of divinity, holiness, inner light, but too many details make you think. On the reliefs of Mesopotamia, the gods are depicted in clothes from which rays seem to emanate. In Peruvian frescoes, the radiance is not smooth, but in straight lines, as if from a light source. And in the text, it is sometimes directly stated, "They shone so that people could not look." Is this a description of an aura? Or is it still light from something material? Lamps, spotlights, helmets? In some images, it is noticeable. The rays do not come from the head, but from an object that resembles a helmet or a mask. The Sumerian gods have enlarged eyes as if behind a transparent visor. In Indian descriptions, the gods descend in sparkling shells where their bodies do not burn from the heat. To the modern ear, this sounds like spacesuits. If you connect all these fragments, the picture becomes different. The fiery teachers could have been real beings who descended to people in protective suits and with light sources. For ancient man, this was a miracle. For us, technology. A dragon egg? Mysterious finds often become the subject of the most daring theories, linking them to aliens, ancient civilizations, or cryptids. Sometimes the desire to solve a mystery leads to wishful thinking, but perhaps this story is truly special. In 2020, an Arkansas resident stumbled upon a strange object while digging a hole for a pool. It had a flattened egg-shaped form and was a little more than half a meter long. The man immediately posted photos on social networks, causing quite a stir. Supporters of the cryptid theories decided that they were looking at a dragon egg, deformed under the pressure of the earth. Indeed, the find resembled either a petrified monster or something unknown, hidden in a stone shell. But there were also skeptics who said that this was just an unusual geological formation. Adding to the mystery was the fact that the owner of the find soon refused to comment on anything and hand over the object for analysis. Whether it was an ancient artifact, a trace of an extraterrestrial civilization, or simply a trick of nature, we can only guess now. Islands that don't exist. The history of cartography is full of mysteries. Old sea charts from the 17th to 18th centuries show islands that don't exist today. Hundreds of sailors swore that they saw land, landed on the shore, even described plants and animals. But after decades, these islands disappeared. Modern satellites confirm that there is only empty ocean in the marked places. The most famous example is Sandy Island in the Coral Sea. It was put on maps for almost 200 years. In 2012, Australian researchers decided to double-check the point and found nothing. Not a piece of land, not a trace of a reef, just a depth of 1.5 kilometers. But how then to explain hundreds of records of captains? A mass hallucination or a mistake by all at once? There are dozens of such cases. The islands of Brabant, Frederick, Emerald, which existed for centuries and suddenly disappeared. Scientists attribute everything to measurement errors, but the sailors left detailed reports, with drawings, descriptions of flora and fauna. Either the entire world navigation has been wrong for centuries, or we are faced with a phenomenon for which we simply have no explanation. There are versions that these were not islands, but objects that could rise from the water and go back into the depths. Perhaps volcanic formations, perhaps something else. Some ufologists believe that these could be bases or ships of giants that were disguised as land. Crocodiles in Christian churches. Imagine, you enter a church and there is a crocodile there. Sounds like the start of a joke, right? However, this is a real story because the medieval temples of Europe were actually decorated with stuffed animals of these reptiles. The crocodile settled in the Seville Cathedral back in the 13th century thanks to King Alfonso X, who received it as a gift from the Egyptian emir. After the reptile died, its skin was stretched over a wooden base and hung from the ceiling of the cathedral. In Italy, in the sanctuary of the Blessed Virgin Mary of Mercy in Curtatone, a crocodile hangs, reminiscent of the proximity of evil for 5 centuries. And in the chapel of the Virgin Mary in Macerata, there is another one, according to different versions, brought by the Crusaders, or which came to the city itself in 1589. The Church of St. Mary in Ponte Nossa has preserved a crocodile skin since 1594, despite orders to remove it. And 40 kilometers from St. Petersburg in Oranienbaum, priest Oleg Emelianenko in the Church of St. Spiridon set up a real zoo where Nile crocodiles live, among other animals. Thus, stuffed crocodiles in churches are not a myth, but part of a religious and cultural tradition reflecting historical connections and beliefs of past centuries. The cost of building the Cheops Pyramid. We are used to skyscrapers that grow with the help of metal frames and modern technology, but the Cheops Pyramid, built around 2600 BC, still amazes the imagination. Its height reached 146 meters, and only by the 13th century AD did buildings appear higher. To understand how much it would cost to build such a pyramid today, historians and engineers estimated the costs of stone, transportation, salaries, crane rental, and other details. The amount is impressive, about $5 billion. After all, about 2.5 million cubic meters of limestone will be needed, for which you'll have to go to quarries, and for the interior cladding, thousands of tons of granite from Aswan, located hundreds of kilometers away. Add to this designers, geologists, fuel for transporting blocks and giant cranes. In ancient times, everything was done by hand. It is believed that thousands of free workers worked on the construction site, regularly changing teams that received decent food and housing. They moved multi-ton blocks along ramps using wooden rollers and erected a colossal structure that was surprisingly precise in its fit. Even today, it is impossible to fit a knife blade between some of the stones. According to some experts, the construction took from 20 to 27 years. About 2 tons of meat were needed daily to feed the workers, not counting grain, vegetables, and water. It is noteworthy that the project itself was headed by Hemiun, the pharaoh's nephew, who actually acted as the chief architect. It was he who coordinated the work of tens of thousands of people, which in itself speaks of the impressive organization of labor in ancient Egypt. Today, the pyramids remain not only an object of historical heritage, but also a source of eternal questions about what humanity is capable of in order to realize ambitious goals. For the Egyptians, the Pyramid of Cheops was more than just a building. It was a symbol of the pharaoh's power and the highest engineering achievement of its time, which still inspires us to bold achievements.
DNA that doesn't match. We are used to thinking that the human genetic code has been studied inside and out. But in fact, there are still mysteries in our DNA that no one can answer. Scientists call them unexplained insertions, fragments that do not match the evolutionary line. They do not resemble primate DNA, nor known viral traces, nor random mutations, as if these pieces of code came from somewhere outside. There is a hypothesis that some of these sequences could have come to us through ancient contacts, with viruses or even with extraterrestrial microorganisms. It sounds fantastic, but in recent years, scientific journals have openly discussed the idea of panspermia. Life could have been brought to Earth by meteorites or comets. And if so, then it is possible that part of our genetic code is indeed alien. Some researchers go even further. They claim that there are structures in the human genome that are too ordered to be an accident, as if someone left a mark, a genetic watermark. Naturally, official science does not support such statements, but the very idea that we can have an alien trace encoded in us turns our understanding of man upside down. And then we must ask the question, who are we really? The result of random evolution or the bearers of a message left by someone who lived long before us? A lavish, pointless event. Balingham is a small village in England, but it was here that one of the most lavish meetings in history took place 500 years ago. England's King Henry VIII and the French monarch Francis I held a grand celebration that went down in history as the Field of the Cloth of Gold. Officially, the meeting was supposed to strengthen the alliance of the two kings against Emperor Charles V, but in reality it became a competition in luxury. Henry built a giant tent palace of 10,000 square meters, the walls of which were brick at the base and painted to look like stone above. The roof resembled tiles, and at the entrance there were fountains from which red wine flowed. The celebration lasted 18 days, accompanied by feasts, tournaments, and masquerades. The kings were visited by 3,500 retinues, for whom 98,000 eggs, 2,200 sheep, and even exotic dishes like guinea pig and dolphin were prepared. But even amidst the luxury, rivalry prevailed. Henry challenged Francis to a fight and lost. Soon he entered into an alliance with Charles V, and a year later England was at war with France. The Field of the Cloth of Gold became a symbol of incredible extravagance that ruined the treasuries of both countries. Dinosaur footprints in rock art. The scientific community encountered an unusual discovery in northeastern Brazil, where they found a unique juxtaposition of dinosaur tracks and ancient petroglyphs. In the state of Paraíba, in the Serrote do Letreiro region, researchers discovered fossilized imprints of theropods, sauropods, and iguanodonts from the early Cretaceous period, as well as pre-colonial cave paintings. This unique site brings together ancient traces and art, creating a symbolic connection between painting and fossils. Previously, petroglyphs were also found near dinosaur tracks, but not in such close interaction. Researchers believe that ancient artists deliberately chose places near ancient footprints for their drawings. This emphasizes a deep perception of the connection between art and natural phenomena. Petroglyphs, which previously received less attention, are now being studied in conjunction with ancient traces. The rock paintings are circular figures with radial lines and other geometric motifs, the meaning of which remains a mystery. Among the designs, images reminiscent of nets, stars, and snakes stand out, indicating a variety of styles and possibly the presence of several authors. Skeletons of giants. Strange notes can be found in the archives of the 19th and 20th centuries. Skeletons up to 3 meters tall were found in the burial mounds of North America. In the Andes, archaeologists spoke of jaws and skulls too large for a human, but almost all of these finds disappeared. Some blame the church, others blame state institutions that cleaned up inconvenient evidence. Myths of different peoples repeat the same thing. The Sumerians wrote about the Anunnaki, tall as towers. The Bible mentioned the Nephilim, sons of God who took earthly women for themselves. Indian tribes told of battles with giants who came from heaven and ate human flesh. Scientists explain the legends as fantasies and mistakes. But why is this motif found among peoples who are not related to each other? And why is it always associated with heaven and gods? If giants really existed, they could have been either another branch of humanity or hybrids of humans and aliens. In that case, the history of our planet is not only the evolution of Homo sapiens, but also coexistence with those who were much larger and stronger. Mars, our second home? It seems that just a little bit more, and we will really get to Mars. SpaceX is already building rockets for flights, NASA is testing life support systems, China is preparing for its missions. Loud plans are in the news. The first people will land on the red planet in the coming decades. Colonies, domes, resource extraction, greenhouses. It all sounds like the beginning of a new era, but Mars has its dark sides. Radiation will kill a person in a few months. The atmosphere consists almost entirely of carbon dioxide, and sandstorms can last for weeks. To survive there, humanity will have to not only build bases, but completely rebuild the very idea of life. This is not moving to a new land. This is existence on a hostile planet. And yet the main question is different. What if we are not the first there? Photos from Mars rovers again and again cause controversy. Strange stone formations like ruins, objects similar to statues or mechanisms. Scientists call it pareidolia, the way our brains see familiar shapes. But if even some of these finds are real, then Mars's history could be much more eventful. And maybe when we get there, we won't build a new home. We'll just return to the old one. Ritual cargo from the Philippines. Guam Island is on the western edge of the Pacific Ocean, 2,300 kilometers east of the Philippines. In the coastal Ritidian cave, archaeologists found microscopic remains of rice in red ceramics. The age, according to radiocarbon, is 3,500 to 3,100 years. This is the earliest evidence of the delivery of a cultivated plant to such a distant island. The key evidence is phytoliths,
tiny silica structures that preserve the shape of leaves and husks after the decomposition of the plant. A team from the University of Guam and the Australian National University examined the shards with micro-CT scanning and petrographic analysis. The shapes of the phytoliths matched Asian rice varieties. There are no tools for cultivating fields or traces of irrigation nearby, which means that the grains were not brought for farming. Researchers are leaning towards the version of ritual baggage. Rice could have been used in rituals or as a symbol of connection with the homeland of the settlers. This is the only pre-European use of rice in the Mariana Islands. The plant would not appear on other remote atolls for 2,000 years. The find confirms that the first Pacific explorers did not drift with the currents, but planned their route and carried elements of culture with them, even if they could not be grown on the new shore. The first concrete. The ancient Romans left behind an incredible architectural legacy. Their large-scale projects, bridges, roads, aqueducts, and of course majestic buildings amaze us to this day. Among the most famous buildings of ancient Rome are the Colosseum, the symbol of the city, and the lesser-known but no less impressive Pantheon Temple. The Pantheon is famous for its huge dome, which remained unrivaled in diameter until the 20th century. One of the key factors in the success of Roman builders was the use of concrete, or as they called it, opus cementitium. Roman concrete was a real revolution in construction. It was a mixture of sand, crushed stone, lime, and volcanic rock, which made it strong and durable. This material allowed the Romans to build not only massive but also durable structures, many of which have survived to this day. Interestingly, modern research shows a unique feature of Roman concrete: its ability to self-heal. When microcracks formed in the material, the interaction of water and volcanic dust led to chemical reactions that sealed these cracks. This became one of the main secrets of the incredible durability of Roman buildings, which survived thousands of years. While modern concrete begins to deteriorate after a few decades, Roman structures made using this ancient technology continue to stand to this day. Persian windmills. These unique windmills are located in the city of Nashtafan in eastern Iran and are ancient structures that are almost 1,000 years old. They were built around the year 1000 and are among the earliest examples of wind power in the world. These mills differ from the European models we are used to in their design. They have a vertical axis, which is ideal for the local climate. The strong winds that blow in this region rotate wooden blades connected to a vertical shaft, which drives a mechanism for grinding grain. What is especially impressive is that these mills are still in working order today. They are made of natural materials such as wood, clay, and reeds, which not only highlight the skill of ancient Persian builders, but also ensure the durability of the structure over the centuries. These mills not only fulfilled their practical function, but also became a symbol of the sustainability and ingenuity of ancient engineers. Today, they are an important cultural heritage, reminding us of how ancient civilizations were able to harness natural forces with minimal impact on the environment. The Nashtafan mills are living testament to the technical genius of the ancient Persians, still working after a millennium. Wolfsegg Iron Cube. Austria, 1885, a worker cuts a piece of brown coal and a tiny iron cube with smooth edges and grooves, as if cut with a lathe, rolls out of the black lump. Newspapers immediately dubbed the find a bolt from the Stone Age because the coal was deposited in layers that were approximately 20 million years old. The cube ended up in a museum in Salzburg, where it was discovered that it was not pure iron, but cast iron with a high content of carbon and slag, an alloy typical of 19th century blast furnaces. A tiny tail is visible on the edge, the place where liquid metal flowed out of the mold. Under a microscope, the surface is dotted with porous rust cavities like blast furnace slag. It looks like a piece of waste accidentally got into a coal trolley and sank into the seam with it. And yet, looking at the almost perfect planes of the cube, visitors speculate that the geometry is too correct for a random fragment. What if it is a part of an unknown mechanism that nature hid in the thickness of the rock? Aliens inside the Earth. When we talk about extraterrestrial life, we look to the sky. We wait for signals from Mars, Venus, Jupiter's satellites, or distant galaxies. But there is a much more alarming version. We need to look not above, but below, right under our feet. At depths of hundreds of kilometers under the Earth's crust, there are zones that humans have never seen. There are no direct observations there, only indirect seismological data and magnetic anomalies. Scientists record strange bursts of heat that cannot be explained by the movement of magma. In some places, strange sources of radiation are recorded that should not be there. And then there are myths. Ancient legends spoke of underground gods, creatures that lived in the bowels of the earth and from time to time came to the surface. In the 20th century, this idea received a new lease of life. The Hollow Earth Hypothesis, the Third Reich's secret expeditions to Antarctica, stories about entrances to underground worlds at the North and South Poles. Science considers this a sick fantasy. But why then do many geophysical anomalies still remain unexplained? Modern ufologists claim that some UFOs do not come from space at all. They emerge from the oceans, from under the ground, from cracks and faults, as if their real base is not in the distant stars, but right here on our planet. And if this is so, then the eerie thought arises that we are looking for neighbors among the stars, but our real neighbors have been living beneath us all this time, and perhaps they are the ones who decide how much we are allowed to know about the universe. The warrior in the burial turned out to be a non-binary person. An unusual war grave was discovered by archaeologists in the town of Suontaka in southern Finland back in 1968. Scientists were surprised that the deceased, next to whom lay a weapon typical of military graves of that time, had women's jewelry. Only now, thanks to the development of genetic technologies, it was possible to shed a little light on who the warrior was buried in Suontaka. Based on the analysis of DNA extracted from a fragment of the warrior's bone, it was determined that he had an additional X chromosome. This may indicate that the deceased had Klinefelter's syndrome, a rare male genetic disorder characterized by low testosterone levels, lack of hairline, gynecomastia, male breast enlargement, and learning difficulties. This burial is distinguished by an unusual and pronounced combination of male and female symbolism, which may indicate that the deceased was not associated with any of the traditional genders, but with something else. Exactly how the Suontak warrior was perceived by society remains unknown, but a more thorough study of the burial could add a little clarity to this mystery. The warrior was buried in women's clothing next to brooches and bird feathers, which is typical for a female burial rite. However, a toothless sword was also placed in the burial. After some time, a bronze sword with a carved handle was also placed in the grave. Space owl. Something is looking right at us in the depths of space. Two glowing eyes on a black background, and it's not an illusion. The James Webb has captured a collision of two ring galaxies, so rare that the chances of seeing it are less than winning all the lotteries at once. The mass is 320 billion suns. In the center are two black holes devouring matter and flashes of the birth of new worlds. Scientists say it's just a merger, but why do we see the image again? Why does the universe put together eyes, symbols, signs? Maybe it's a coincidence, or maybe it's a message. And the question is, who left it? 2,000 kilometers to Antarctica. An international team of archaeologists and paleoecologists has confirmed the outstanding skills of Polynesian navigators who were able to reach the southern latitudes of the Pacific Ocean, although they never made it to Antarctica. Research on Enderby Island, located 500 kilometers south of Stewart Island, has shown that the Polynesians briefly inhabited this remote territory. The remains of cultural layers and garbage heaps confirming their presence were found on the island. With the help of radiocarbon analysis, it was possible to accurately date the settlements, around 1250 to 1320 AD, which coincides with the known dates of the colonization of eastern Polynesia. Professor Atal Anderson and Janet Wilmshurst, who led the research, noted that Enderby was the southernmost place of residence of the ancient Polynesians. Further voyages south were virtually impossible due to the cold ocean waters, lack of resources to repair boats, and the risk of hypothermia. These findings highlight that the Polynesians, although outstanding navigators, still had limits to their expeditions. Skulls with nails. In the southeast of Spain, among the ruins of ancient settlements, archaeologists have found something that immediately evokes an alarming feeling. 7 severed heads. Some have huge metal nails driven into them, not all the way through, but with obvious force, as if the skulls had been nailed to something. But why? At first they thought trophies of war, like the heads of enemies, displayed to intimidate. But a chemical analysis of the bones gave an unexpected result. Not all the skulls were foreign.
In one city, 3 out of 4 heads belonged to people who came from afar, and in another, almost all were local. And this changes everything, because in one place, strangers were apparently executed and put on display, and in another, their ancestors were kept as relics. The heads were found near houses, inside dwellings. So, this is no longer a demonstration of force, it is memory and respect. The Greeks wrote that the Gauls kept the heads of their enemies in boxes, and that Spanish mercenaries carried them on spears. But in reality, everything was more complicated. Portals in space. Physics allows that space-time can fold into tunnels, wormholes. They connect points of the universe directly, bypassing millions of light years. On paper, this is the Einstein-Rosen theory. In reality, only equations so far. But too many hints indicate that these corridors may exist. Astronomers from time to time record strange phenomena, bursts of radiation that appear and disappear in a split second and in different points of space almost synchronously, as if the signal did not follow the usual path but jumped. Officially, such anomalies are called interference or rare processes in pulsars. But what if these are markers of working portals? Legends also keep their versions. The Sumerians wrote about the gates of the gods. The Mayans, about heavenly paths along which star brothers returned. Tibetan texts describe doors between worlds that open only on certain days. Surprisingly, the ancients spoke of the same thing, the possibility of instantaneous transition to where the usual path is impossible. For a civilization that has learned to control such structures, the galaxy ceases to be boundless. There is no need for thousand-year flights, for giant ships. It is enough to step into the right place and get off at another star. Then the UFO phenomenon becomes clear. They do not have to fly from far away. They just come. There is only one question. If such portals are already working, then where are their entrances? Perhaps they are hidden in black holes, perhaps in the depths of the oceans, perhaps right on Earth, in those very places of power that have been considered forbidden since time immemorial. Massacre in Croatia. The remains of the victims of the massacre in the territory of present-day Potocani, Croatia, which took place 6,200 years ago. Scientists were able to find the remains of 41 people, apparently representatives of the pastoral community from eastern Croatia. The burial was discovered in 2007 during rescue excavations on a private lot, the owner of which planned to build a garage. However, an unexpected discovery changed his plans. The discovery of so many dead and buried people at the same time prompted archaeologists to think that there were very large settlements in this area already 6,000 years ago. To learn more about the victims, scientists conducted a whole range of studies, including analyzing the DNA of the buried. It turned out that only a few close relatives were among the dead. 70% of those killed did not have close relatives in this burial, which indicates the indiscriminate nature of the massacre. There were almost equal numbers of women and men among those killed, so the likelihood of a large-scale battle can also be rejected. Traumatic brain injuries were found in 13 out of 41 people. The causes of death of the rest of the buried have not been established, but scientists believe that they were also killed, but in a way that did not leave marks on the skeleton. For example, they were strangled or stabbed to death. Archaeologists believe they have found evidence of an ancient social upheaval brought about by climate change and population growth. The migration of various groups resulted in increased competition for resources, primarily water and grazing for livestock, and as a result, in a massacre. Rock Crystal Reliquary. This reliquary, created in France between 1175 and 1200, is a work of art and religious craftsmanship. It is made of gold and silver and decorated with rock crystal, which adds transparency and lightness. The relics of saints or other valuable relics of great importance to believers could be kept inside. Such reliquaries often became objects of worship. They were exhibited in churches and monasteries where they attracted pilgrims from all over. The design of the reliquary itself is especially interesting. It is made in the form of a miniature building with decorative arches, columns, and small figures of saints, which symbolize the idea of a spiritual temple. The transparent cylinder of rock crystal allowed believers to see the contents, which strengthened their faith in the sanctity of the stored relics. Stars that disappeared. In 2019, astronomers published the results of a 10-year project comparing old and new sky catalogs. Thousands of stars observed in the mid-20th century were no longer in the same places. Some had gone out, others had simply disappeared as if they had been erased. Official explanations were cautious: observational errors, supernovae that were overlooked, or variable stars with an atypical cycle. But the problem is that some of these luminaries could not have disappeared so quickly. The story of Tabby's star, the object KIC 8462852 in the constellation Cygnus, was especially loud. Its brightness would drop by tens of %, then return as if something huge was blocking the light. This could not be explained by either planets or dust clouds. The blood-chilling version sounded simple: a megastructure, an artificial structure the size of a star system that collects the energy of its star. Scientists call this the Dyson hypothesis, a sphere or swarm of satellites that can only be built by civilizations an order of magnitude higher than us. At first it sounded like science fiction, but the disappearance of stars and strange dips in brightness make us return to it again and again. If at least some of these cases are real, it means that there are civilizations in the universe that are able to control the energy of entire stars, and they leave traces that we can already see. Crown. The oldest crown found to date was discovered in the Nahal Mishmara hoard in 1961 in the Judean desert near the Dead Sea. This amazing hoard included more than 400 objects dating back to the Copper Age. The crown, made of blackened copper, has a diameter of about 18 centimeters, and its upper edge is decorated with 5 figures. Among them are 2 long-necked birds, presumably vultures, stylized doors or gates, and a T-shaped object which may symbolize the hilt of a sword. Along with the crown, a scepter with images of horned animals, a copper wicker basket, and many ceramic vessels and bowls were found in the hoard. Despite the majestic appearance of the crown, scientists do not believe that it was worn by a ruler. Most likely, it was used in ritual ceremonies or funeral rites. It remains a mystery how these treasures could have been kept in a cave for thousands of years. And this crown can be considered the first crown in the form we are accustomed to. Traces of fire under megaliths. Under many ancient megalithic structures, archaeologists find charred layers. But these are not the remains of fires. The temperature was too high to be created by ordinary people. The stones are melted in places, as if they were exposed to plasma or a powerful energy source. In Pumapunku and Tiwanaku in Bolivia, traces are visible on basalt slabs, as if they were cut with a hot tool. In Egypt, melted edges of blocks are recorded where there should be neither fire nor volcanism. Scientists explain this by random natural processes, but the temperature clearly exceeded the level of any natural fire. Too many coincidences, as if in ancient times energy comparable to modern plasma cutting or even more powerful was used. Then megaliths cease to be tombs or ritual buildings. They become traces of work with technologies that people simply did not have. Cursed tomb in Israel. Archaeologists in Israel have found a tomb with a curse warning written at the entrance for those who try to open it. The 1,800-year-old tomb is located in the Beit Shirim necropolis, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. At the entrance to the crypt, a warning for people is written in red letters. Yaakov Gasher swears to curse anyone who opens this grave so that no one opens it, an ancient message says. Scientists have come to the conclusion that the person who is buried in the tomb was most likely a Jew, and the inscription itself refers to the early Byzantine or late Roman period. Adi Ehrlich, an archaeologist at the University of Haifa, said the message was frightening because the relatives of the deceased were apparently afraid that the tomb might be looted. At that time, the tombs were opened quite often. However, for now, archaeologists have suspended excavations to keep the tomb safe. Previously, archaeologists have found in Israel a ring that protects against a hangover. Large Neolithic settlement in Germany. Archaeological excavations in the city of Dobeln, located in the state of Saxony in Germany, led to the discovery of a large settlement of the early Neolithic. The excavation began in October last year when construction of an amusement park was scheduled to begin on the site. As a result of the work of a group of 18 archaeologists, a settlement was discovered where dozens of houses stood 7,000 years ago. The 10-hectare site contains many pits for poles, allowing professionals to reconstruct floor plans. The largest house that was discovered was 30 meters long and 8 meters wide. Currently, archaeologists continue excavations and have already found several thousand artifacts, including pottery shards, flint tools, as well as fragments of clay figurines and idols. If you add water. We are used to thinking that life requires one simple ingredient, water, and then there is a temptation. What if we bring it where it does not exist? The Moon, Mars, Venus, Mercury. 4 different stories, 4 different endings. The Moon already has water, in the form of ice at the poles, hidden in the eternal darkness of craters. Add oceans, and we see a planet with stormy tides. But the Moon is too small to hold an atmosphere. The water will quickly evaporate into space, leaving only a short-lived sea. The Moon will not become a second home. It will remain a dead desert, only temporarily shiny. Mars looks more promising. There are glaciers there. There was water in ancient times. If we fill it with oceans, the planet will come alive. The air will become denser, clouds will appear, the climate will change. But Mars is not protected by a magnetic field, and the solar wind will gradually tear off the atmosphere. Any second Earth there will be temporary. In thousands of years, the water will go back into space. Venus is the other side of history. If you add water to a place with hellish heat and acid clouds, it will boil instantly. You will get an ocean of steam, the greenhouse effect will increase, the temperature will become even higher. It is impossible to flood Venus with water. It will only destroy it. To revive this world, you first need to cool it and destroy the dense atmosphere, an almost impossible task. Mercury is an extreme case, the closest planet to the Sun with a hot surface and an icy shadow in craters. Water will not linger there. It will boil during the day, freeze at night, and eventually evaporate into space. Mercury is too close to the star to support life, and then it becomes clear. Just add water is not a solution. Only Earth turned out to be that unique platform where water can linger and work for life. The other worlds are too unstable, too hostile, or too small. The water there is not a source of life, but a reminder of how delicate the balance on our planet is. Drawings of creepy people with huge heads. Now we will go to central Tanzania, where ancient artists in a cave left us strange drawings. In the Svaga hunting reserve, archaeologists have found a uniquely painted rock. There, the researchers found the remains of drawings, some of which disappeared without a trace. But one drawing has survived quite well, although it raises many questions. Drawings of humanoid figures with large heads were found in the Amaki 4 cave. According to archaeologists, this cave is several hundred years old, but it is difficult to determine exactly when these drawings appeared here. Researchers believe that these are the heads of buffaloes. In the Sandawe culture, buffaloes were an important part of the rituals, but there were no people with buffalo heads in their history. Although the horns of these characters exactly resemble those of a buffalo, not far from this place, archaeologists found 2 more similar drawings of creepy humanoid creatures with huge heads. All of them are very similar to each other. So far, archaeologists cannot give an exact answer who the artists tried to portray in antiquity, but scientists still have a small clue. In the Kandoa region, where the rock paintings were found, the Sandawe people live, who use various drawings for their rituals. Perhaps they will help archaeologists explain the origin of these drawings. From Tanzania, we will go to the Middle East to another cave, where the finds are no less impressive. Mars Archives. There is too much talk about Mars, but there is one strange coincidence. Almost all ancient peoples mention the red star in legends as a place where gods lived or where they came from. The Sumerians associated it with the god of war, Indian epics, with heavenly chariots, and the Egyptians generally called it the place of wanderers. Modern researchers add fuel to the fire. Back in the 70s, rumors came to Earth about secret photos from orbit where the ruins of cities were supposedly visible. These photos were never officially published, and those that are available today raise new questions. Mars looks like a huge library, whose pages are covered with billions of years of history, and we see only the cover. Man with Toulouse deformity of the skull. The photo shows a man with a deliberately deformed skull, probably 19th century France. The author of the picture could not be identified. Deliberate deformation of the skull was extremely common in many parts of Eurasia in the Neolithic. The earliest written mention belongs to Hippocrates, who around 400 BC described the macrocephalic or long-headed people. In those distant times, the unusual shape of the skull apparently was considered a sign of nobility or had a cult significance. But even at a much later time, the custom of deforming skulls was preserved in Scandinavia, Great Britain, and Eastern Europe. In France, low-income people, mostly peasants, used thick fabric ribbons, bandeaux, to deform children's skulls. This practice was called Toulouse deformation, but children's heads deformed in completely different regions of France until the 20th century. Wealthier and more conscientious citizens pitied children with elongated skulls as they believed that this reduced their intelligence. The custom of deforming skulls is still alive today. For example, in the island nation of Vanuatu, the people of Malekula use this practice to look like the local hero Ambot, who had an elongated skull and a large nose. Alien artifacts on Earth. History keeps finds that do not fit into any chronology. In Turkey, in the temple complex of Göbekli Tepe, there are columns with carved drawings of animals and abstract symbols. They are about 12,000 years old. Officially, at that time, people did not yet know either agriculture or architecture. But here we see an engineering concept and symbolism that has not been fully deciphered. Who built this complex and why was it later buried as if they were trying to hide it? In South America, in Sacsayhuaman, giant stone blocks are fitted to each other so tightly that it is impossible to push even a blade between them. Stones weighing hundreds of tons are laid with perfect precision and with polygonal edges. Modern technology has difficulty repeating such joints. This means that 500 years ago, the Incas had something that they themselves called the technology of the gods. On the other side of the world, in Baalbek, Lebanon, lies a stone known as the Southern Megalith. It weighs over 1,000 tons. Until now, no one has explained how ancient builders could have moved it. But the fact remains, this block is processed, and it was clearly an attempt to use it in construction. The only question is by whose hands. Similar finds include the Ural metal spirals, the megalithic platforms of Tiwanaku, and perfectly drilled holes in the stones of Egypt, leaving the feeling of a high-precision machine at work. Every culture has artifacts that seem to have wandered from the wrong time. Scientists explain this by primitive technologies, coincidence, and a play of nature. But then why do such coincidences repeat themselves all over the planet, in different eras and among different peoples? The version that these are traces of strangers is convenient not because it is sensational, but because too much begins to fit into one picture. And if these are indeed artifacts left by someone else, then their purpose could be simple: to show that we are not the first, and that everything we build today is just a faint echo of what was already here thousands of years ago.
Isaac Newton predicted the end of the world. Isaac Newton is one of the greatest minds in history. He changed humanity's understanding of the world by formulating the laws of motion and gravity. But his interests went far beyond physics. He was a mathematician, astronomer, alchemist, and theologian who sought to understand the world in its entirety. One of the most curious discoveries associated with Newton was his predicted date for the end of the world, 2060. He calculated it based on the Bible, or more precisely, the Book of Revelation. Newton believed that the 1260 days indicated there actually meant years. Having counted this period from 800, the time of the founding of the Holy Roman Empire, he arrived at 2060. However, the scientist himself noted that this was just an assumption. Unlike modern scientists who separate science and religion, Newton saw them as a single whole. He believed that the world was structured according to divine laws and tried to discover them. At the same time, he was skeptical of hasty prophecies and warned that incorrect forecasts could discredit the Holy Scriptures. Today, his views seem unusual, but in his time, natural philosophy encompassed not only science, but also the search for divine design in nature. Newton was not only a great physicist, but also a man who sought truth in all its manifestations.
Stone Age bag. Around 2500 BC, a Neolithic man in what is now Germany found an ingenious way to decorate his bag. During excavations near Leipzig in 2012, archaeologists found more than 100 dog teeth neatly arranged in a grave, suggesting that they decorated the flap of the bag. Archaeologists noted that over time, the leather or fabric of the bag disappeared, leaving only the teeth pointing in one direction. These teeth likely decorated the outside of the bag. All of them are arranged in the same way, reminiscent of a modern flap. These finds were made in the Profan Quarry, Other important artifacts were found in the same area, including the burial of a woman who lived around 50 BC, buried with half a kilogram of gold jewelry. However, even against the backdrop of such rich finds, the bag with dog teeth was a real discovery. This is the first time that archaeologists have found direct evidence of the existence of such an accessory. The teeth of a dozen dogs were used to decorate this bag. In other burials of the time, archaeologists also found wolf teeth, dog teeth, and shells, which were apparently used to decorate bedspreads and clothing. When the fabric decomposed, only these decorative elements remained.
Martian coral. On July 24, 2025, the Curiosity rover sent a picture that initially made scientists freeze. On the rock was a shape that was all too familiar to us from Earth. It looked like coral. A real fossilized coral is evidence that Mars could once have had an ocean full of life. NASA was quick to explain, no biology, just minerals that took on a bizarre shape due to water and wind erosion. A rock, not an organism. Our brain itself draws familiar images where there are none. The official version sounds logical. Too logical. But how many times have we heard the same thing? A rock accidentally looks like a statue. A shadow accidentally looks like a tower. A shape accidentally repeats the pattern of a living creature. At what point does the number of these coincidences become proof? Maybe this really is a trick of nature. Or maybe we're just not ready to hear the main thing. Mars was alive, and that's why we're so drawn there, because deep down, we're returning home. 2,000 kilometers to Antarctica. An international team of archaeologists and paleoecologists has confirmed the outstanding skills of Polynesian navigators who were able to reach the southern latitudes of the Pacific Ocean, although they never made it to Antarctica. Research on Enderby Island, located 500 kilometers south of Stewart Island, has shown that the Polynesians briefly inhabited this remote territory. The remains of cultural layers and garbage heaps confirming their presence were found on the island. With the help of radiocarbon analysis, it was possible to accurately date the settlements, around 1250 to 1320 AD, which coincides with the known dates of the colonization of eastern Polynesia. Professor Atal Anderson and Janet Wilmshurst, who led the research, noted that Enderby was the southernmost place of residence of the ancient Polynesians. Further voyages south were virtually impossible due to the cold ocean waters, lack of resources to repair boats, and the risk of hypothermia. These findings highlight that the Polynesians, although outstanding navigators, still had limits to their expeditions.
Oldest photographs of people. Old photographs in family albums can contain rare snapshots of ancestors born in the early 19th century. But who was the very first person to be photographed? Several historical figures whose photographs have survived to this day lay claim to this title. Hannah Stilley, Gorby. She was born in 1746 and lived in Delaware. Apparently, Hannah was a housewife and farmer. Stilley's photograph was taken in 1839, when she was 93 years old. This is one of the oldest photographs of a person that has survived. Conrad Heyer. This man was born in Waldoboro when it was part of the province of Massachusetts Bay. He was born around 1753, although the year of his birth is disputed. It is believed that his photograph was taken in the early 1850s. Mary Monroe Sanderson. Born in 1748 in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, Mary lived until 1852 when she was 104 years old. Aunt Moser. Her photograph was taken in 1852. At the time of the photo, she was, according to various sources, 103 years old, which also makes her one of the oldest women to be photographed. Ezra Green. Born in 1746 in Massachusetts, Ezra became an army surgeon. He lived to be 101 years old, dying in 1847. Green's photograph is one of the earliest surviving. John Adams. John was born in 1744 and, in addition to serving in the army, worked as a shoemaker. 2 years before his death at the age of 104, he posed for a daguerreotype portrait, which is considered one of the oldest. Balthus Stone. George Washington's Army veteran, born in 1747, posed for a photograph at the age of 103. He died shortly thereafter. John Owen. Born in Salisbury in 1735, Owen lived to be 107, making him one of the longest-lived people ever photographed. Caesar, an African slave, was born around 1737. He outlived several generations of masters during his life. At the age of 115, he posed for one of the earliest daguerreotype portraits of African Americans. Caesar died in 1852, leaving behind a rare record of black life in the 19th century. All of these people have left their mark on history not only because of their long lives, but because their images have been preserved in photographs, allowing us to see the past. Life in the icy oceans. When looking for life, we always look to Mars, but perhaps the most promising worlds are even further away, under a layer of ice. Europa, Enceladus, Ganymede. These satellites look like silent white balls, but beneath their surface lie oceans tens of kilometers deep. They have everything: water, heat from internal sources, and the chemical elements necessary for life. On Enceladus, the Cassini spacecraft recorded geysers gushing into space. Organic molecules were found in them. On Europa, cracks are observed from which clouds of steam periodically burst out. And if oceans really do rage under the ice, then this is an ideal environment for the development of living creatures. Maybe similar to terrestrial squids or jellyfish, or maybe completely different with forms and organics unlike anything familiar. Scientists say cautiously, a high chance of habitability, but we understand, if there really is life there, it will no longer be another find. It will be a meeting with creatures that have lived for millions of years in isolation, in another ocean, under another sky. And then the solar system will no longer seem like ours. It will become common. He disappeared 100 years ago. The remains of a climber who disappeared on Everest in 1924 have been found. We are talking about Andrew Sandy Irvine, who tried to conquer the summit with George Mallory. Irvine's family did not know about his fate for a long time, and the discovery brought them relief. A crew filming a documentary for National Geographic came across a boot during the melting of the glacier. Experts assumed that it belonged to Irvine. Relatives lost hope that his tracks would be found. For them, Uncle Sandy has always remained a family hero about whom they spoke with trepidation. Irvine was only 22 years old, and it is believed that he had a camera with undeveloped film, which could have contained photographs from the summit. Now Irvine's family has given a DNA sample to confirm the identity of the remains found. A sock found in a shoe had a name tag with his name on it: A.C. Irvine. Irvine and Mallory were last seen alive on June 8, 1924. Mallory's body was not discovered until 1999. Mysterious tablets. This golden tablet is one of many unique finds made by Serbian archaeologists in the ancient city of Viminacium, located in what is now Serbia. Viminacium was an important Roman city and military camp that flourished in the 1st to 4th centuries AD. However, discovered artifacts such as these tablets indicate that there were much older and more mysterious customs here. The tablets are engraved with strange symbols that do not resemble the usual Latin or Greek letters, and their meaning remains a mystery to researchers. These signs could be part of an unknown language, a code, or magical symbols that were used in religious rituals. Since the tablets are made of precious metals such as gold and silver, it can be assumed that they had a special meaning for those who created them. Perhaps they were amulets or charms that protected the owner or brought good luck. Despite all the efforts of archaeologists, it has not yet been possible to decipher the mysterious symbols, and they remain one of the greatest mysteries of Viminacium. The Great Migration. The same motif is repeated in the legends of many peoples of the world: heavenly ships carrying people to other worlds. The myths of America told of the snake god Kukulkan, who came from heaven and just as suddenly returned, taking with him the chosen ones. In Asia, chariots were mentioned that carried heroes to heaven alive, not in a metaphorical sense, but literally. Even in the biblical tradition, the prophet Elijah ascended on a fiery chariot and was never seen again. In such stories, they usually say, "This is an allegory," but the descriptions are too straightforward. In Indian epics, ascension is accompanied by sound, smoke, flame, as if we were talking about a real device. In Chinese legends, the souls of the heavenly chosen ones were taken on ships, from where they then never returned. For ancient people, this looked like a migration to other worlds. For us today, like a selection and evacuation program. There is a version that these ascensions were not a metaphor for the spiritual path at all, but a direct description of contact. That some people were taken on ships, perhaps for preservation, experiments, or resettlement to other planets.
Therefore, different peoples have a strange feeling. The best, the most special ones disappear, go to the sky. Worth its weight in gold. Mexican scholars recently invested 9.5 million pesos in acquiring 3 unique documents from the late 16th century. This investment opened a new page in history, providing valuable information about the period of the Spanish arrival in the lands of modern Mexico. We are talking about the Codex of San Andrés Tetepilco, compiled at the turn of the 16th and 17th centuries, which vividly illustrate the events of that time, including the reign of Itzcoatl, the 4th ruler of Tenochtitlan and founder of the Aztec Empire, and the arrival of Hernán Cortés. These rare codices were purchased for the National Library of Anthropology and History through the efforts and support of individuals and organizations. A payment of 9.5 million pesos allowed them to be returned from private hands to the public domain. The analysis showed that the codices were created from amate, traditional paper made from tree bark with the use of natural dyes, which emphasizes the high skill of their creators. The authenticity of the documents was confirmed through collaboration with experts from various scientific institutions. The San Andrés Tetepilco codices stand out among other artifacts because of their unique combination of indigenous traditions and European influences. Containing texts in Nahuatl and Spanish written in the Latin alphabet, this treasure provides an opportunity to delve deeper into the study and understanding of a key period in the region's history. Magic circles in the desert. For decades, scientists have puzzled over the origins of circular patches of grass in the Namibian desert that appear and disappear seemingly for no reason. Now it seems the mystery has been solved. These so-called magic circles with a diameter of 2 to 10 meters form an amazing pattern on the surface of one of the driest places on Earth. For a long time, their origin remained a mystery. There were 2 main theories. One associated the circles with the activity of termites. The second suggested the self-organization of grass to combat drought. Recently, scientists from the University of Göttingen in Germany proposed a new theory. They believe that the circles can form due to extremely rare and irregular precipitation. This causes the grass to grow at the edges of the circles, leaving the center lifeless since it is the roots of the grass, extending to great depths, that allow the plants to survive and thrive in conditions of low water. This discovery not only reveals the mystery of Namibia's magical circles, but also demonstrates nature's amazing ability to organize itself and adapt to changing environmental conditions. Giant from the USA. At the end of the 19th century, deep in the dense forests of North America near a small settlement that is today known as the Black Hills, South Dakota, a discovery occurred that shocked the scientific world of the time. A local forester walking along his usual routes came across an unusually large stone protruding from the ground. He was surprised by its size and unusual shape and decided to invite a group of archaeologists from a nearby university. When archaeologists began excavating, they discovered that the stone was actually part of a giant stone sarcophagus. Inside, they found the well-preserved remains of a man whose height exceeded 3 meters. This discovery caused much controversy among scientists of the time, some of whom argued that the find could shed light on the existence of ancient giants mentioned in the legends and myths of many cultures around the world. Despite significant interest from the scientific community, much of the information about the find and the object itself have been lost over time. Only a couple of photographs taken during the excavations and a few entries in the personal diaries of the expedition members have remained to this day. These photographs, although not very clear due to the limitations of technology at the time, show the enormous size of the skeleton compared to the people who excavated it. Rich in history and mystery, the Black Hills continue to attract explorers and adventurers eager to uncover the secrets of ancient civilizations and perhaps find lost archaeological treasures. Thus, the story of the archaeological discovery of an ancient giant man remains one of the most mysterious and unsolved pages in the history of archaeology. Dark matter, dark life. We don't see 90% of the universe. Everything we know, stars, planets, galaxies, is just a small part. Scientists call the rest dark matter and dark energy. We know that it exists. Its gravity keeps galaxies from collapsing. Its influence can be felt in space, but we don't know what it's made of. The most disturbing thing about this story is that dark matter is invisible to our instruments. It passes through us, through the Earth, through every atom, and we don't feel anything. But what if it can form structures? What if there are worlds inside this invisible framework that we simply don't notice? Some physicists admit that dark matter can interact with itself, forming complex systems. This means that there could be something like dark biology there, life that exists in another phase of reality. It's not made of carbon, not of silicon, but of something that has no shape at all for us. Then our familiar world is just a thin layer on the surface of a deeper universe. And it is possible that right now we are surrounded by this invisible life. It moves nearby, passes through walls and cities, looks at us, and we are not even able to understand what exactly surrounds us. And the question in this case sounds harsher than usual. What is scarier, to meet aliens on another planet, or to find out that they have been living nearby all the time, just in another layer of our reality?
A couple from the United States with a strange story. In 1875, in downtown Philadelphia, in an old cemetery, workers discovered the mummified bodies of a man and a woman believed to have died in 1792, although this information was later refuted. No records of the Ellenbogen family or other documents confirming their existence have been found. The bodies went through a process of saponification, becoming soap mummies due to the specific burial conditions, where the fat was converted into a soap mass, slowing decomposition. The man, who was more saponified than the woman, and the woman with vestiges of blonde hair on her head, presumably died at a later date than originally thought, which was confirmed by the discovery of round-headed pins, the technology of which did not emerge until 1824. The man was likely a manual laborer and had healthy bones but degenerative changes in the cervical spine. Both had preserved internal organs, but the man had poor oral hygiene, resulting in most of his teeth falling out during his lifetime. The woman died at about 30 years old and had health problems including ureteral and gallstones and vascular calcification. The soap lady is now on display at the Mutter Museum, and the soap man is in storage at the Smithsonian Natural History Museum, where scientists are studying them to try to uncover the mysteries of their lives and deaths.
Missions that are not talked about. Officially, space is transparent. Every NASA or ESA mission is announced in advance. Everyone knows the launch dates, routes, and tasks. But in reality, there are gaps in the history of space exploration that no one is in a hurry to explain. Archives contain references to devices that were never presented to the public. They were launched from military testing grounds without press releases or television broadcasts. Formally, they were communication satellites or atmospheric reconnaissance. But sometimes strange lines appear in documents. Search for anomalies, recording unidentified sources. In the 70s, the USSR allegedly launched devices that were supposed to photograph the dark side of the moon in high resolution, but the results were classified. In the US, there was talk that separate reconnaissance probes could have been sent to Mars, not to search for water, but to search for objects. Why are all these missions so carefully hidden? If nothing was found, they could show emptiness. But if the data was classified, it meant that there was something there that would change the rules of the game. Something that is more convenient to store in boxes marked classified for now. And the question arises, maybe we already know much more about life in the universe than we think. Only this information is carefully dosed. The mystery of the Alak-Icom monoliths. In the south of Nigeria, in the state of Cross River, about 300 stone monoliths were discovered, created from the 16th to the beginning of the 20th century. These monoliths, arranged in circles and made of volcanic stone, surprise with their diversity. Their height varies from 0.3 to 1.8 meters. What attracts the most attention is the unique carvings on their surfaces, which include repeating patterns, stylized faces, and mysterious inscriptions that may be an ancient form of writing. The local Ekoi people call these stones atol or akwanshi. Distributed among 30 communities, the monoliths often form perfect circles, becoming the centerpiece of settlements or the decoration of forested areas. Made primarily of basalt, the monoliths also include limestone and sandstone specimens, all carved with distinct human features and symbols reflecting tribal affiliation. These monoliths carry a deep meaning associated with the cult of ancestors. According to local beliefs, each monolith symbolizes an ancestor,
whose soul continues to dwell in the stone, connecting the living with the spirits of the departed. This tradition maintains connections between generations and maintains respect for the history and culture of the Ekoi people. However, the monoliths are surrounded by many mysteries. Their exact history, the meaning of the symbols printed on them, and the purposes of their use have not yet been revealed. Despite many years of research, ancient inscriptions on stones remain undeciphered, posing a challenge for archaeologists and historians. The monoliths are currently under threat from weather, erosion, and vandalism, making their conservation a global concern. Tombs not for people. Archaeologists are used to interpreting everything in the usual framework. If there is a stone box, then it is a sarcophagus. But in Egypt and Peru, there are burials that do not fit into the human scale. In Saqqara, there are granite boxes weighing 60 to 70 tons. They are processed with jewelry precision, but inside they are so huge that the body of one person would look like a crumb in them. For several, inconvenient. Why such dimensions? On the other side of the world, in the Andes, tiny stone sarcophagi were discovered. Their proportions are so small that an adult body simply does not fit in them. The official version is that these are burials of children or symbolic rituals. But then why were they made with the same skill as royal tombs? Another mystery is emptiness. Many of these sarcophagi do not contain traces of burials. No bones, no burial objects, as if they were never used as tombs. And then a version appears that these are not tombs, but capsules. Containers in which those who were not human were once stored or transported. Too big, too small, different. Perhaps this is where the answer lies as to why the myths of almost all peoples speak of gods who came from the sky. Stones, bones, myths, and stars fit together into a mosaic. We are just part of a much larger story, and the question remains the same. Not do they exist, but when will they return again? Thanks for watching this video to the end. Bye everyone.